Hello, Father Fred here again today, and today we're going to be in chapter 39 of Genesis. But before we do that, I want to tell you about what's been going on here at my house. This week is about like spring break, and everybody in my family took off and went to Colorado. Everybody but me and my dog, or their dog. Well, I don't want their dog to be lonesome, so I go downstairs and I feed it in the morning and feed her at night. And then I go to bed downstairs with her so she won't feel scared or lonely. And she sleeps beside me. First night, there was half the pillow was my head, and part of the other half of the pillow was part of her body. And I don't know which part it was. But we slept well first night. We slept well the second night. But the third night, she just started barking real loud. She was right in my face, and I was sound asleep, and she started screaming, barking, and I jumped up. Didn't know what was going on. I thought, well, either there's somebody messing around the house, or she needs to go outside. So I went up with her. So she led me out the door, went out into the hallway, and all she wanted to do was play. She just lay down in the floor there and played. Well, her name is Cricket, but the thing that was going through my mind was not Cricket. It was more like Kick It, because I was tired of that dog, and it didn't take long to get tired. When there's a dog right nose to nose with you nearly and barking as loud as she can and you're asleep, it is exciting. So I thought, okay, little girl, you can sleep by yourself from now on. So I went upstairs into my pad, and I slept upstairs the last 4 nights, and she could bark or she could do what she wanted to, but I wouldn't be able to hear her. So that's what was going on in my life here this last week. Now, we're going to go to chapter 39, but before we do, you might remember this. Chapter 37 was introducing a new character. His name is Joseph, and he is the favorite son of Jacob and Rachel. She gets him, or the daddy gives him a coat. Sometimes we hear about a coat of many colors, a coat that was real nice, and he didn't give anything to the other brothers. So the other brothers, they didn't like him a little bit. So they planned, they were going to kill him. They decided not to, but that's what they were going to do to start with. Now, that is in 37, and it's also in 39. In 38, there's an interruption. There's a story about one of Joseph's other sons or brothers named Judah. And it's the whole story about Judah is chapter 38. Then 39, it starts with Joseph again. It's just like the redactor or the editor wanted to get this in there, and this is as good a place as any. So let's look at chapter 37 for just a minute before we start with 39, because they're going to flow one right into the other. So what I would like for you to do right now, and it would be good, you can use your Bible as your workbook, your textbook. You can write in your Bible. You can make highlighters. You can do just something that you can remember. There's nothing that's not holy about writing in a Bible. Okay, for right now, let's go to chapter 37, and we're going to go to verse 26. And we're going to read from 26 to verse 30. I'll read it for you. So I'll give you a little bit of time. Go to chapter 37 of Genesis, chapter 37, and we're going now to verse 26. So here we are. I'm just going to read. Verse 26 says, Judah said to his brothers, what is to be gained by killing our brother Jacob and concealing his blood? Why kill him? He's our brother. Verse 27 says, come, let us sell him to these Ishmaelites. Keep these words in mind, Ishmaelites, instead of doing away with him ourselves. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh. His brothers agreed. Now, here's a little snippet that's going to come in that has nothing to do with the rest of it. It says, Midianite traders passed by, and they pulled Joseph up out of the cistern. Now, where did they come from? The Ishmaelites were there, and the boys were going to sell the brother to the Ishmaelites. But now it mentions that the Midianites come through. Now those are two different groups of people. And it says, they sold Joseph for 20 pieces of silver to the Ishmaelites who took him to Egypt. Now they are the Midianites. They shouldn't. This is something that is completely different. It goes from Ishmaelites. These are the followers of Ishmael, and the Midianites. And verse 29 says, when Reuben went back to the cistern and saw that Joseph was not in it, he tore his garments, and returning to his brothers, he exclaimed, the boy is gone, and I? Where can I turn? What can I do now? What I would like for you to do right now is go back to verse 28, and we read, the Midianite traders passed by and pulled Joseph up out of the cistern, and they sold Joseph for 20 pieces of silver to the Ishmaelites who took him to Egypt. See that? They took him to Egypt. The Ishmaelites did. Now I want you to look at the very last verse, verse 36. Just go down to the very last verse and look at this. The Midianites, meanwhile, sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, an official of Pharaoh and his chief steward. Who? The Midianites took him to Egypt. Remember that. The Midianites. Turn back to verse 28, and it says, they sold Joseph for 20 pieces of silver to the Ishmaelites who took him to Egypt. So if you're reading this, especially if you've been in a class where you studied Bible, oftentimes, most of the time, you're going to be reading this as if it comes off God's lips. So what are you going to do when it says the Ishmaelites took him to Egypt, and then it says the Midianites took him to Egypt? Which one was it? It can't be both, can it? So it's a problem for people that decide they're going to read the Bible literally as if it's coming off God's lips. These are inspired words of God, but it's not because God's saying them. It's because God is inspiring these people to write these things, and we've got two different people that are doing the writing, one from the north and one from the south, and we're going to look at them for right now. Look at this. If we have, in verse 28, you see where it says, Midianite traders passed by and pulled Joseph up out of the cistern. If you can put a little mark around that, or if you can take a highlighter and just kind of go over it so that when we start reading, we won't even read that line because it has been placed in there. You'll see the sense that it makes. I'm going to read it without that in there. Verse 26 is, Judah said to his brothers, what is to be gained by killing our brother and concealing his blood? Come, let us sell him to these Ishmaelites instead of doing away with him ourselves. After all, he is our brother and our own flesh. His brothers agreed. They agreed, and this is what they did. We're going to skip that first part. They agreed. They sold Joseph for 20 pieces of silver to the Ishmaelites. That is from the southern writer. Now, if you go to the northern writer, we're going to read this. It's the first thing that happens in verse 28. It says, Midianite traders passed by, and they pulled Joseph up out of the cistern. And when Reuben went back to the cistern and saw that Joseph was not in it, he tore his garments. See how that goes together? And returning to his brothers, he exclaimed, the boy is gone, where can I go? So if you look at 28, you don't really know who is selling Joseph to these Ishmaelites. Is it, verse in 28, it says, Midianite traders passed by, and they pulled Joseph up out of the cistern, and they sold Joseph for 20 pieces of silver to the Ishmaelites who took him to Egypt. Now, who is it that sold him to the Ishmaelites? Take that first part of 28 out of there, because the ones that sold him to the Ishmaelites was the brothers. So let's look at just a moment again. We're going to leave out that first part of 28 and read just 27 and the last part of 28. And it says, come, let us sell him to these Ishmaelites instead of doing away with him ourselves? After all, he is our brother, our own flesh." His brothers agreed. They sold Joseph for 20 pieces of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took him to Egypt. So you've got two different writers. And again, if you've been studying the Bible in some Bible class, you have probably thought or been told all of this comes off God's lips. So if it all comes off God's lips, you got to find some way to make the Ishmaelites and the Midianites the same people, and they're not. Now let's look at that very last verse again on chapter 37 and verse 36. The very last one in 37, it says this: "The Midianites meanwhile sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, an official of Pharaoh and his chief steward." That goes back to the Midianites. But we're going to find that is from the north, and we're not going to have that anymore, because in chapter 39, where we're going to skip, it's going to be all the J source, or the southern source. So let's go to chapter 39 and look at verse 1. And it says this. You got 39? Chapter 39, verse 1. "When Joseph was taken down to Egypt, an Egyptian Potiphar," same ruler, "an official of the Pharaoh and his chief steward, bought him from the Ishmaelites." This is the J source. It goes back to the brothers selling him to the Ishmaelites, and now the Ishmaelites are in Egypt with him. That's where they're taking him. I'm going to read that again. "When Joseph was taken down to Egypt, an Egyptian Potiphar, an official of Pharaoh and his chief steward, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him there." The Ishmaelites took him there. If you looked at that last verse in 37, it wasn't the Ishmaelites, it was the Midianites. So that all with the Midianites, that all comes from a different source. It is the southern writer, and they're bringing him to Egypt. And the ones that are bringing him are the Ishmaelites, or the descendants of Ishmael. Verse 2, this tells us that it's from the south. "The Lord was with Joseph." The Lord. If it says the Lord, it's in the south. If in the north, it's going to be God. So this is the south. It's been the south all the way through there when you pick out the right ones in chapter 37, and now all of it, everything in 39. "The Lord was with Joseph." Now, doesn't sound like he's with Joseph, does it? This writer is telling us that everything's going to be okay. And this is a phrase he uses over and over. "The Lord was with Joseph, and he enjoyed great success and was assigned to the household of his Egyptian master." So he did such good things that now he had such success, whatever he was doing, that now the Pharaoh is going to give him charge of everything in his house. Everything but one. Verse 3, "When his master saw that the Lord was with him," keep saying this because he wants us to know that everything's going to come out okay. "When his master saw that the Lord was with him and brought him success in whatever he did, he favored Joseph and made him his personal attendant. He put him in charge of his household and entrusted him to all his possessions." All his possessions but one. Verse 5, "From the moment that he put him in charge of his household and all his possessions," and here's what happened because he was going such a good guy, "the Lord blessed the whole Egyptian house." The Egyptian house. So this is the Pharaoh. This is the king. Pharaoh means king in Egypt. "The Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake." He's doing this for Joseph's sake. He's blessing this house because the Lord is with Joseph, and he's going to make Joseph, he's going to be the hero. but it doesn't look like it for a while. The Lord's blessing was on everything he owned, both inside the house and out. Things are going to take a turn. Be ready for that. Verse 6, having left everything he owned in Joseph's charge, he gave no thought with Joseph there to anything but the food he ate. The only thing that Joseph didn't have charge of was what he ate. Everything else in the house is going to be in charge of Joseph. Here comes the good part. Maybe good. Now Joseph was well built and handsome. You know what that can mean. Verse 7, after a time, his master's wife looked at him longingly and said, lie with me. Now that's an expression that is going to be used over and over. Lie with me. Poor Joseph. But he refused and said to his master's wife, look, as long as I am here, my master does not give a thought of anything in the house, but has entrusted to me all he owns. All he owns except one thing, his wife. Verse 9, he has no more authority in this house than I do. He has withheld from me nothing but you, since you are his wife. How then could I do this great wrong and sin against God? So it wouldn't be just a sin against the Pharaoh. It'd be a sin against the Pharaoh's God or his God. Verse 10, although she spoke to him day after day, he would not agree to lie with her or even be near her. He gets out of there. But one such day, or one certain day, when Joseph came into the house to do his work, and none of the household servants were there then in the house, so it's just going to be Joseph and the wife. Verse 12, she told him, she laid hold of him by his cloak, saying, lie with me. But leaving the cloak in her hand, he escaped. Escaped means he got out of there, out of danger. He escaped and ran outside. When she saw that he had left his cloak in her hand as he escaped outside, she cried out. She cried out to her household servants and told them, look, my husband has brought us a Hebrew man who mock us. He came in here to lie with me. But I cried out loudly. He was trying to force himself on me. When he heard me scream, he left his cloak beside me and escaped and ran outside. Does it sound like the Lord is with him? Verse 16, she kept the cloak with her until her master came home. Now, she's going to tell everybody. Verse 17, then she told him the same story. The Hebrew slave whom you brought us came to me to amuse himself at my expense. He's going to amuse himself at my expense. Verse 18, but when I screamed, he left his cloak beside me and he escaped. He got away. That's something. He escaped. That's a word that you wouldn't use unless you were the ones that were the perpetrator. He's not going to escape if he's the one that came there to do this. But when I screamed, he left his cloak beside me and escaped outside. Verse 19. When the master heard his wife's story, in which she reported, thus and so your servant did to me, he became enraged. Verse 20. Joseph's master seized him and put him in jail where the king's prisoners were confined. So now he's in jail, and there he sat in jail. But, this is interesting, isn't it? But the Lord was with Joseph. If that's what's happening to him when the Lord is with him, I wonder what would happen to him if the Lord hadn't been with him. Verse 21. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him kindness by making the chief jailer well disposed toward him. He falls on his feet everywhere he goes, but he gets into trouble. Verse 22, the chief jailer put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners in the jail. He's so good, he takes over everywhere he goes. Everything that had to be done there, he was the one to do it. And the last verse, the chief jailer did not have to look after anything that was in Joseph's charge since what? Since the Lord was with him. So we know it's going to come out good because the Lord is with him and was bringing success to everything that he was doing. Success. I'm not sure what success means. Doesn't sound too successful, does it? But he is now in jail. What's going to happen in the future? Because the Lord is with him. So if the Lord is with him, he's not going to be with Pharaoh's wife. Be careful wherever you wear your cloak, and watch out for the king's wife. See you next week, and remember, things are going to be good because the Lord is with Joseph. God bless you. Have a wonderful day.